Welcome back to the deep dive. You know, looking at the sources we're unpacking today, you might honestly think you tuned into the Funeral Channel Network podcast by mistake, but
Right, because of where we ultimately end up in the discussion.
exactly. But I promise you, it all ties together in this incredibly profound way. We are looking at a single, deeply layered topic today.
And it's one that really requires us to shift our perspective on, well, on how we think about warning signs.
Yeah, totally. Because when we think about the warning systems in our lives, we generally expect them to be loud, right? Like you install a state-of-the-art security system in your house, and you expect that if someone breaks in, there are going to be blaring sirens.
Flashing lights.
Right. Maybe an automated voice telling you exactly which window is breached. It's binary. You are either safe or you are incredibly, obviously unsafe.
Because that kind of system is literally designed to jolt you into action. It bypasses any critical thinking and just demands your immediate visceral attention.
Your adrenaline spikes and you just react.
It's-
But what if the intruder doesn't break the glass? What if instead they somehow have a key and they just quietly slip in through the back door?
And they don't make a mess right away.
No, not at all. They just, I don't know, slowly, silently move a piece of furniture an inch to the left. Then a week later, they chip a tiny little fleck of paint off the baseboard in the guest room.
So the changes are microscopic.
Microscopic. By the time you actually notice that something is fundamentally wrong with your house, the damage is completely structural. They've been living there for months, maybe years, just rearranging the foundation while you slept soundly upstairs.
That is a deeply unsettling image, I have to say. But it really is the perfect mechanical analogy for what we are unpacking today.
It really is. We are talking about a scenario where the ultimate alarm system, your body's own central nervous system and natural warning mechanisms, just remains completely terrifyingly silent.
Right, while a very real threat establishes residency.
And that silent intruder is gastric cancer, which is more commonly known as stomach cancer. And today, we're going to look at how we build a new alarm system for it.
And it doesn't start where you'd think.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't start in a research hospital or a doctor's office. Surprisingly, it starts at a funeral.
Which is such a fascinating pivot.
It really is. So we're going to explore the stealth biology of stomach cancer. We're going to decode the very specific meaning behind the periwinkle blue awareness ribbon.
A ribbon I think a lot of people probably don't even recognize.
Oh, absolutely. And then, and this is the part that is going to completely change how you view community health, we are going to examine the fascinating way that remembrance and mourning intersect with public health education.
Because we'll be looking specifically at how platforms like the funeral program site are essentially turning the mourning process into a decentralized grassroots early detection network.
It's an incredible intersection to explore. I mean, it bridges two environments that we rarely think of as connected.
You have the cold clinical reality of an insidious mutating disease on one hand.
Right.
And on the other, you have the deeply sociological, emotional world of how we memorialize the people we've lost.
What we are really examining today is the human response to biological silence. Like when the body fails to warn us, how does the community step in to sound the alarm?
Which is just a brilliant framing.
Okay, so let's unpack this, because while the subject matter is undeniably serious, I mean, we are dealing with oncology, we're dealing with mortality and loss, the ultimate goal of this deep dive is empowerment.
It's about finding those surprising structural aha moments hidden inside these medical awareness campaigns.
Exactly, because the more you understand the mechanics of the threat, the more agency you have over your own health. So I want to start with the symbol itself, the vanguard of the awareness campaign.
The periwinkle blue ribbon.
Right. It represents stomach cancer, a disease that affects tens of thousands of individuals globally every single year. But the first major hurdle we have to address is that this disease has a significantly, almost dangerously lower public profile compared to other major forms of cancer.
The disparity in visibility is staggering, honestly. And it's not just a superficial metric. That lower public profile is the central sociological problem that public health advocates are trying to solve.
Why is that? I mean, why does visibility matter so much?
Because when we talk about disease in the modern world, visibility isn't just about getting a hashtag trending. Visibility is the currency that buys survival.
Wow. Okay. It makes me think of public health awareness as this giant, incredibly crowded, noisy room.
I like that analogy.
You walk into this room and some diseases have a massive stadium-grade megaphone. Think about the pink ribbon for breast cancer.
It's ubiquitous.
Completely. It's on soup cans in the grocery store. It's painted on the 50-yard line of NFL fields. I mean, it has entire months dedicated to it, where major metropolitan cities literally light up their skylines and bridges in pink.
It is loud. It is unavoidable.
And rightfully so,
Yeah?
because that constant blaring awareness saves thousands of lives through early mammogram detection.
Absolutely, it works.
But then you have stomach cancer. It's represented by this soft, quiet, periwinkle blue ribbon, and it's like it's standing in the far corner of that exact same crowded room, speaking at an absolute whisper.
A whisper that no one can hear over the megaphones.
Exactly. So why is that? Why do some severe conditions that claim thousands of lives, fly so far under the cultural radar?
What's fascinating here is that it fundamentally comes down to the cyclical nature of public health funding and the psychology of advocacy. In the landscape of modern medicine, visibility equates to resources.
Meaning money.
Money, yes. It equates to institutional funding for research, it equates to community dialogue, and most importantly for you, the listener, it equates to everyday, top-of-mind awareness.
Right, because if you don't hear about it, you don't think about it.
Precisely. When a disease has a megaphone, the early symptoms and the risk factors become common cultural knowledge. You hear about it on morning talk shows, people casually discuss it at the water cooler.
It just becomes part of the background noise of life.
Yes, it is integrated into the baseline anxiety of the general public, which naturally prompts preventative action.
So if you don't have the megaphone, you just don't get the screening.
Exactly. When a disease has a lower public profile, that lack of visibility directly mechanically contributes to the disease remaining unrecognized on an individual level.
Because you aren't looking for it.
Right. If you aren't constantly reminded by your environment that a specific threat exists, you're infinitely less likely to look for it in your own life. And this isn't an accident, by the way.
What do you mean?
Well, stomach cancer lacks the dramatic, sudden onset in younger demographics that usually sparks massive, viral, grassroots campaigns. It is historically viewed as an older person's disease.
Ah, see.
And, quite frankly, it involves the digestive tract, which is a topic people are sociologically conditioned to be less comfortable discussing openly compared to other parts of the body.
People don't want to talk about their stomachs or their digestion at a dinner party.
Exactly, it's taboo.
So the lack of PR isn't just a marketing problem for a nonprofit somewhere. It is a literal structural health hazard.
It is the first barrier to entry for survival. And that is exactly why the periwinkle ribbon is so vital. It is not just a piece of fabric or a nice graphic to put on the corner of medical pamphlet.
What is it then?
It is a structural tool designed to combat that exact lack of visibility. It's an attempt to build a megaphone from scratch. It serves as a visual anchor for awareness, education, and remembrance.
I want you, listening right now, wherever you are, to just picture that color in your mind for a second. Periwinkle blue.
It's a very specific shade.
It is. It's that unique, soft mix of pale blue and violet. It's incredibly calm. It's subtle.
It's definitely not a screaming fluorescent neon color.
Right. It's not going to immediately catch your eye in traffic. And I want you to think about how many awareness symbols you probably encounter on a daily basis. You see them on bumper stickers in front of you on the highway. You see them as lapel pins on politicians.
Social media profile pictures.
Yes. We are completely bombarded with these symbols, but how often do we actually know the vital stories, the cellular biology, or the specific medical warnings attached to them?
We see the symbol, but we completely miss the curriculum.
That's a great way to put it. We miss the curriculum.
And the curriculum attached to this specific periwinkle ribbon is incredibly urgent. Because the reason stomach cancer has such a low public profile isn't solely due to a lack of media savvy or a failure of advocacy groups.
No.
The low profile in the public square is actually a direct reflection of the stealthy biology of the disease itself.
Oh, wow.
The disease operates quietly inside the body, so the public conversation around it has historically been quiet too. The sociology is mirroring the biology.
Which brings us to the actual biology of the stomach lining, and this is where that home security analogy from the beginning goes from being a metaphor to being terrifyingly literal.
Because it really is a silent intruder.
It is. Gastric cancer develops in the mucosa, which is the innermost lining of the stomach. And the defining characteristic of this development is that it grows slowly over time.
Very slowly.
And it heavily masks its presence, presenting almost zero noticeable symptoms in its early stages.
To understand why the body's alarm system completely fails here, We have to elevate our understanding of what the stomach actually does.
Because we usually just think of it as a bag that holds our lunch, right?
Right. But the stomach is actually one of the most hostile, dynamic, and extreme environments on the planet.
Okay, lay it on us. How hostile is it?
Well, the parietal cells in your stomach lining pump out hydrochloric acid that drops the pH of the stomach to anywhere between 1.5 and 3.5.
Just for context for you listening, battery acid is around a zero 0.8 on the pH scale, and lemon juice is around a 2. So the stomach is basically a vat of incredibly corrosive liquid.
It is. It's designed to chemically incinerate foreign biological matter and break down incredibly tough proteins.
So how does it not just eat itself?
Good question. To prevent the stomach from literally digesting itself, the mucosa, that inner lining, secretes a thick layer of mucus rich in bicarbonate.
Like baking soda.
Exactly, to neutralize the acid right at the surface of the tissue.
Mm-hmm.
But even with that shield, the environment is so harsh that the epithelial cells making up the lining are constantly being damaged and shed.
They just get destroyed by the acid.
Yes. The turnover rate is astonishing. Your stomach essentially replaces its entire lining every few days.
Every few days, it's constantly regenerating just to survive its own existence.
Right. And here's where the mechanical flaw occurs. Every single time a cell divides to replace a damaged one, it has to copy its DNA.
And I'm guessing that's where things go wrong.
Yes. Every time DNA is copied, there is a microscopic chance for a mutation. Because the stomach lining is constantly turning over at such a high volume due to the harsh environment, the mathematical probability of a genetic error occurring is higher here than in more static tissues.
Okay, but, and I'm sure you listening are wondering this too, if abnormal mutated cancer cells begin to develop, why doesn't it hurt?
That's the logical question.
Right. If I cut my finger, the pain is immediate, the alarm bell rings. Why is a tumor growing in my stomach completely silent?
Because the stomach doesn't register cellular irregularities as acute trauma.
Really?
Yeah. The nervous system in the gut, the enteric nervous system, is heavily wired to detect stretching, which tells you when you're full.
Makes sense.
And it's wired to detect certain chemical imbalances that might trigger nausea if you eat a toxin. But it is not wired with the same type of high-density acute pain receptors that your skin has.
Because it's too busy dealing with the acid.
Exactly. The stomach is already used to dealing with constant low-level irritation and cellular death. Therefore, as these mutated cells begin to cluster and form a microscopic tumor in the mucosa, the stomach just interprets it as part of the daily grind.
It's just another Tuesday for the stomach.
Right. It doesn't trigger the body's acute pain receptors in a way that would make you drop everything and run to an emergency room.
So the intruder is in the house, rearranging the furniture, but the motion sensors are calibrated to ignore it because there's always activity going on inside.
Precisely. And this leads us to the ultimate paradox of stealth diseases, which is the concept of the delayed diagnosis.
That phrase alone is terrifying. Delayed diagnosis.
It is. In the medical community, a delayed diagnosis isn't necessarily a failure of the doctor. In the case of gastric cancer, it is a biological feature of the disease.
It's baked into how the cancer works.
It is the vast, silent gap between when the cellular mutation begins and when medical intervention finally occurs.
But if the physical alarm bells aren't ringing, how on earth are you supposed to know you're in danger? I mean, how can an individual be proactive if there is literally nothing to notice early on?
This is the crux of the entire public health mission behind the Periwinkle ribbon. If the physiological alarm system is broken, you have to build a cognitive one.
A cognitive alarm system.
Yes. Proactivity, in this context, doesn't mean waiting to feel terrible. It means understanding your personal baseline, understanding your environmental and genetic risks, and applying intellect to compensate for the lack of physical pain.
You have to outsmart it.
You have to intellectually know the variables that increase your risk so you can act before the physical symptoms force you to.
So if your body isn't going to warn you, your mind has to step in. You have to investigate your own life.
You have to become a detective.
Which means we need to talk about the triggers. What is actually causing those copying errors in the DNA of the stomach lining? And this is fascinating because when you look at the research, it's exactly like a detective breaking down a suspect list.
And the number one suspect is going to surprise people.
It absolutely will. The number one suspect, historically and globally, is diet. It's noted constantly in the literature that diets high in smoked, salted, or highly processed foods are a massive biological trigger for gastric cancer.
It's a massive factor.
Now, stop and think about that for a second. Smoking and salting foods are literally ancient human survival
That had been
techniques.
around forever.
Right. Before the invention of Freon and the modern refrigerator, if you didn't salt or smoke your meat, your family starved during the winter. These preservation methods literally built civilizations.
They allowed humans to travel across oceans.
Exactly. And now the science points to those exact same methods as biological triggers for cancer. How does something that kept us alive for thousands of years suddenly become the villain?
It is a profound irony of human evolution and modern health. Here's where it gets really interesting. The very preservation methods that allowed human beings to survive starvation historically are now recognized as severe chemical irritants to the gastric mucosa.
Why? What's happening mechanically?
It comes down to chemistry. When you deeply salt food, or when you consume highly processed meats like bacon, hot dogs, or certain deli meats, you are ingesting high levels of sodium, but more importantly, you are ingesting chemical compounds called nitrates and nitrites.
Right, they use nitrates to keep the meat looking pink and fresh rather than turning gray on the shelf.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, nitrates themselves aren't inherently evil. They exist naturally in many vegetables.
Like celery, right.
Yes, celery, spinach. But the problem occurs when those specific processed meat nitrates interact with the unique environment of the stomach. When they hit that highly acidic environment we just talked about, and when they interact with the amino acids in the meat itself, they undergo a chemical reduction.
They transform.
They convert into compounds called nitrosamines.
And what do nitrosamines do?
Nitrosamines are known, potent carcinogens.
Yeah.
They directly damage DNA. So if you are regularly eating a diet heavy in processed, smoked, or heavily salted foods, you're routinely delivering a payload of DNA-damaging nitrosamines directly into that highly vulnerable, constantly regenerating stomach lining.
The lining that's already struggling to survive the acid.
Yes. Over time, that constant chemical bombardment exponentially increases the likelihood of a genetic mutation occurring during cell division. It's an accumulation of microscopic damage over a lifetime of dietary habits.
But wait, if nitrates exist naturally in vegetables, like you said, why doesn't eating a massive bowl of spinach give you stomach cancer?
And that brings us to the counter-narrative, the protective side of the dietary equation.
Thank goodness there's a protective side.
Right. Diets rich in fresh fruits, vegetables, and whole foods actually reduce the risk of gastric cancer. The reason the nitrates in spinach don't form dangerous nitrosamines in your stomach is because vegetables are also packed with vitamin C and other antioxidants.
So they come with their own built-in antidote.
Exactly. Vitamin C actively inhibits the chemical conversion of nitrites into nitrosamines.
That is incredible.
Furthermore, the antioxidants found in whole foods actively neutralize free radicals in the body, which are unstable molecules that can damage DNA. By focusing on a balanced diet of fresh whole foods, you are actively deploying chemical repair mechanisms.
You're sending in a repair crew with every meal.
You aren't just avoiding the bad compounds. You are giving the epithelial cells of your stomach the exact tools they need to repair daily damage. You are fighting the slow growth of abnormal cells at the microscopic level 3 times a day every time you sit down to eat.
That makes the phrase, "you are what you eat," feel incredibly literal and honestly a lot more urgent.
It's a daily active preventive measure.
But diet isn't the only trigger. There is another major risk factor that, when I first started researching this, sounded completely like a sci-fi villain.
Oh, the bacteria.
Yes, it's an infection with a bacteria called Helicobacter pylori, or H. pylori. How does a bacterial infection cause cancer? I thought cancer was a genetic malfunction, not something you catch like a cold.
The story of H. pylori is arguably one of the most fascinating and revolutionary discoveries in the history of gastroenterology.
Really? Why?
Well, for decades, the medical establishment believed that the stomach was completely sterile. They believed that nothing, no bacteria, no virus, could possibly survive in an environment with a pH of 2.
Because if battery acid dissolves metal, it should definitely dissolve a microbe.
Right. It was considered scientific heresy to suggest otherwise. They blamed ulcers entirely on stress and spicy food.
I remember that. Everyone thought stress caused ulcers.
But in the 1980s, 2 Australian researchers, Dr. Barry Marshall and Dr. Robin Warren, discovered this corkscrew-shaped bacteria living in the stomachs of ulcer patients.
And I'm guessing no one believed them.
No one believed them. The skepticism was so intense that Dr. Marshall actually grew a culture of the H. pylori bacteria in a broth, and he drank it himself.
Wait, really? He drank a beaker of ulcer bacteria just to prove a point to the medical establishment?
He did.
That is unbelievably reckless, but I kind of love it.
It's a legendary moment in medicine. And within days, he developed severe gastritis, proving that the bacteria caused the inflammation. They eventually won the Nobel Prize for this.
Amazing. But how does it survive the acid?
The mechanism of how H. pylori survives is what makes it such a dangerous cancer tire. It has essentially evolved an invisibility cloak.
An invisibility cloak. Come on, how does a bacteria build an invisibility cloak?
It secretes an enzyme called urease. Urease takes the naturally occurring urea in your stomach and converts it into ammonia.
And ammonia is a base.
Ammonia is highly alkaline, so the bacteria literally creates a tiny neutralizing alkaline bubble around itself.
Oh my
It
God.
wraps itself in a microscopic force field that protects it from the stomach acid. Using its corkscrew shape, it then drills down through the protective mucus layer and attaches itself directly to the epithelial cells of the stomach lining.
That is evolutionary genius, but it sounds like an absolute nightmare for the host.
It is a nightmare. Because your immune system isn't stupid. It detects that there is a foreign invader in the stomach lining. So it sends an army of white blood cells to destroy the bacteria.
Right, send in the troops.
But the white blood cells can't get through the thick mucus layer to reach the H. pylori. So the immune system just stays localized there, constantly firing off destructive enzymes and inflammatory signals, trying to kill a bacteria it can't reach.
It's like calling in an artillery strike on your own position.
Exactly. The H. pylori sits there, safe in its bubble, while your own immune system bombards your stomach lining, causing chronic, low-grade inflammation.
And inflammation causes damage.
Constant damage.
Yeah.
Over years and decades, that constant grinding inflammation damages the cells. The tissue undergoes metaplasia, changing its structure to try and survive, which eventually leads to dysplasia and ultimately creates an incredibly fertile environment for a carcinoma cancer to develop.
And the truly terrifying part of this? Billions of people globally carry this bacteria right now.
Up to half the world's population.
And the vast majority have absolutely no idea because, again, it operates in total biological silence.
You don't feel a thing.
Wow. So you could have a highly evolved bacterial infection slowly altering the cellular landscape of your stomach lining over the course of decades, and you wouldn't know.
Unless you look for it.
Right, which is exactly what we mean by cognitive awareness. If you don't know H. pylori exists, you can't ask a doctor to test you for it, which, by the way, is a very simple breath or stool test that can be cured with a standard round of antibiotics.
It's remarkably easy to treat once you find it.
You can literally eliminate a major cancer risk factor in 2 weeks if you just know to look for it.
That is the essence of proactivity.
Yeah.
But we also have to factor in the other variables. Lifestyle choices like smoking and the genetic hand you were dealt.
Let's talk about smoking. People usually associate smoking strictly with lung cancer.
They do, but it is particularly insidious for gastric cancer. When you smoke, you're inhaling thousands of chemical carcinogens. Many of those get trapped in your saliva.
And then you swallow the saliva.
You swallow it, delivering a concentrated dose of liquid carcinogens directly to your stomach lining, coating the very mucosa we've been talking about.
That's grim. And then there is the genetic blueprint. Certain inherited genetic conditions significantly raise the risk, right?
Yes. The most notable is a mutation in the CDH1 gene, which causes a condition called hereditary diffuse gastric cancer. If you inherit this specific mutation, your lifetime risk of developing stomach cancer is extraordinarily high, often upwards of 70%.
70%.
Yes, it's a fundamental flaw in the cellular blueprint that makes it very difficult for the stomach cells to stick together properly, leading to a very aggressive form of the disease.
Okay, let me pause and play devil's advocate here for a second, because if I'm a listener and I'm hearing this incredibly long list of suspects, nitrosamines in bacon, stealth bacteria with alkaline force fields, the literal DNA I inherited from my parents, I might start feeling a little fatalistic.
It's a lot to take in.
It is. If I have a strong family history of gastric cancer, or if I grew up in a culture where smoked and salted foods are a staple of daily life and my stomach is already a war zone, does this mean I'm just destined for this?
Not at all.
Because we are grouping things I can control, like whether or not I eat a hot dog, with things I absolutely cannot control, like my genetics. How should a reasonable person weigh these variables without just throwing their hands up and giving up?
It's a very natural, very human reaction to feel overwhelmed by an aggregation of risk factors. But we have to separate the factors into modifiable and non-modifiable categories.
Okay, break down the difference.
Genetics are non-modifiable. You cannot change your CDH1 gene. But, as the seeing epigenetics goes, genetics load the gun, but environment and lifestyle pull the trigger.
Oh, that's a powerful way to look at it.
Having a risk factor is not a guarantee of a disease. It is an indicator of susceptibility.
So it's about shifting the odds back in your favor.
Exactly. If you know you have a strong family history, that knowledge is actually a shield. It dictates your behavior. It means you don't wait until you are 60 years old to get an endoscopy. You start screening at 30.
You change the timeline.
Yes. It means you aggressively test for and eradicate H. pylori. It means you are hyper-vigilant about maintaining a diet rich in cellular-repairing antioxidants. The goal of understanding these triggers isn't to induce panic. It's to provide a tactical roadmap for preventive measures.
It allows you to have highly educated conversation with your healthcare provider instead of just hoping for the best.
Knowledge as a shield.
I love that framing because eventually, if those preventative measures aren't taken, or if the genetic odds simply overwhelm the system, the cancer grows.
The silent phase eventually ends.
Right. And eventually that silent alarm system finally does start to make noise. The stealth phase ends. And this brings us to what I genuinely believe is the most frustrating, dangerous, and psychologically complex part of this entire deep dive.
The everyday symptom.
Yes, the everyday symptom. This is where we transition from cellular biology into behavioral psychology.
The psychology of symptom dismissal.
Let's walk through the early warning signs that finally manifest when the tumor gets large enough to disrupt the stomach's function. The research lists them clearly. Persistent indigestion, stomach discomfort, a feeling of bloating after eating very little, mild nausea, loss of appetite, and unexplained weight loss.
So a very vague list.
It's incredibly vague. I want you to be completely honest. I read that list and thought, well, I guess I have stomach cancer. Because who hasn't had indigestion or bloating? I had stomach discomfort last Tuesday after eating way too much spicy takeout at 9 p.m.
Right, these symptoms are terrifyingly common.
They are ubiquitous.
If we connect this to the bigger picture of how human beings operate in the modern world, we run straight into a fundamental flaw in human nature. We are biologically and psychologically wired to normalize subtle discomforts.
We just push through them.
We have demanding jobs, we have children to raise, we have mortgages to pay, we are stressed. And if you feel bloated or slightly nauseous, your brain immediately, almost as a defense mechanism, searches for the most benign, mundane explanation possible.
Right. You tell yourself, I'm just stressed at work, or I drank way too much coffee on an empty stomach, or I think that dairy I had was a little off.
And we rationalize it instantly.
The symptoms of early stomach cancer perfectly, flawlessly mimic the symptoms of just being a slightly stressed, busy adult living in the 21st century. It's like the disease intentionally disguises itself as a bad burrito.
And that disguise is exactly what makes it so lethal. In the medical field, they call these non-specific symptoms.
Meaning they don't point to one obvious thing.
Right. They don't point directly to a singular, obvious cause. A sudden crushing pain in your left arm points to a heart attack. Persistent indigestion points to life.
Just living life.
And this is where one specific word in our entire discussion becomes the absolute key to your survival.
What word?
The word is persistent.
Persistent. Not occasional, not episodic. Persistent.
Exactly. A bad meal causes indigestion for a night. A stressful deadline at work might cause a loss of appetite for 3 or 4 days. But if the underlying mechanical architecture of your stomach is actually being altered by a growing mass of mutated cells, the symptom will not resolve.
Because the physical cause is still there.
It will persist, regardless of what you eat or how much you relax. A tumor doesn't care if you took an antacid. The crucial behavioral shift we are advocating for here is drawing a hard, non-negotiable line in the sand between a normal, temporary stomach ache and a persistent, unchanging symptom that lasts for weeks.
Because if you don't draw that line, if you ignore the persistent, subtle symptoms, the escalation is mechanically severe.
It gets much worse.
As the disease progresses to more advanced stages, the symptoms shift from subtle discomfort to terrifying physical malfunction. We're talking about vomiting blood or experiencing severe difficulty swallowing, a condition called dysphagia.
That is a horrific transition.
It is. You go from feeling vaguely bloated to literally being unable to mechanically swallow a glass of water. The alarm system goes from a whisper to a deafening, terrifying siren almost instantly.
And we need to explain why that happens mechanically.
Yeah, what's happening inside the stomach at that point?
By the time those advanced symptoms manifest, the tumor is no longer a microscopic cluster of cells in the mucosa. It has grown into a substantial physical mass. If it invades deeper into the blood vessels of the stomach wall, it begins to hemorrhage.
Which explains the bleeding.
Yes,
Yeah.
causing the patient to vomit blood or pass black, tarry stools. If the tumor grows near the top of the stomach, where the esophagus connects, the gastroesophageal junction, it literally acts as a physical plug.
It blocks the pipe.
It physically blocks the tube, which means food and liquid cannot pass into the stomach. That is what causes the difficulty swallowing.
It's a total mechanical failure of the digestive tract.
It is. And tragically, this is the devastating consequence of the delayed diagnosis we discussed earlier. When a patient presents with dysphagia or vomiting blood, the disease is rarely in its early stages.
It's already advanced.
It has likely penetrated the deeper muscular walls of the stomach and potentially spread to the lymphatic system.
I really want you, the listener, to pause whatever you are doing and think about this for a moment. Think about the culture of toughing it out. Think about how often you or your stubborn parents or your friends just power through physical discomfort.
We all do it.
We have this weird cultural tendency to treat enduring minor physical pain as some sort of badge of honor. Or we convince ourselves that we just don't want to be a bother to our busy doctors.
But the reality of gastric cancer explicitly tells us that powering through persistent stomach issues isn't a badge of honor. It is a massive life-threatening gamble.
If you have persistent indigestion for 3 weeks, you are not being a hypochondriac by calling your doctor. You are being a biological realist.
It is the absolute difference between catching the disease when it is highly treatable and highly manageable and catching it when you are in a desperate fight for your life.
And because these symptoms are so easily overlooked by the patient until they become severe, the medical response relies heavily on advanced detection technology once that patient finally does walk into the clinic.
The technology has to step up.
Right, which brings us to the hospital. Let's open up the diagnostic toolkit and look at the treatment arsenal. Once you actually get past the psychological barrier and get into the gastroenterologist's office, early detection is the absolute name of the game.
It's everything.
And the diagnostic process usually involves a very specific triad of investigation: endoscopy, biopsies, and advanced imaging tests. Let's break down how this actually works, starting with the gold standard, the upper endoscopy.
An upper endoscopy is a marvel of medical engineering. It allows the physician to bypass the guessing game entirely.
They just go in and look.
Exactly. They take a thin, highly flexible tube equipped with a high-definition camera and a light source, and they pass it down the patient's throat, through the esophagus, and directly into the stomach.
Sounds uncomfortable, but necessary.
They inflate the stomach slightly with air so they can see all the folds and crevices. They are looking directly at the terrain of the mucosa we talked about.
They are literally looking for the termite damage on the walls.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And the technology has evolved incredibly. Doctors don't just use standard white light anymore. They use techniques like narrowband imaging, or NBI.
What does that do?
NBI filters out certain wavelengths of light, utilizing specific blue and green bands that are highly absorbed by hemoglobin in the blood. Because cancer cells demand a massive blood supply to grow rapidly, they create dense, chaotic, abnormal networks of microscopic blood vessels.
So they basically build their own supply lines.
Exactly. Under NBI, those abnormal vascular networks light up like a map, allowing the doctor to spot a precancerous lesion or a tiny tumor that would be virtually invisible under normal light.
That is incredible. They are using light spectrums to highlight the cancer's own supply lines. And if they see one of those chaotic networks, or if they see an ulcer that looks suspicious, they move to the second part of the triad, the biopsy.
Right. The endoscope isn't just a camera, it has a tiny working channel. The doctor can pass microscopic forceps down the tube and snip away a tiny millimeter-sized piece of that suspicious tissue.
Just take a little sample.
That tissue is then sent to a pathology lab, where it is sliced incredibly thin, stained with special dyes, and examined under a microscope. The biopsy is what delivers the cellular truth.
It's the definitive answer.
Yes, the pathologist looks at the nucleus of the cells. Are they uniform and orderly, or are they chaotic, enlarged, and rapidly dividing? The biopsy provides the definitive binary answer. Yes, this is an adenocarcinoma, or no, this is just a benign stomach ulcer caused by H. pylori.
Okay, so the camera spots the anomaly, the biopsy confirms the cancer.
Right.
What role do the imaging tests play, the CT scans and the MRIs?
If the biopsy confirms cancer, the doctor knows what they're dealing with. but they don't yet know the scope of the battlefield. The endoscopy only sees the inside surface of the stomach.
Ah, you can't see outside the walls.
Right. It can't tell you if the tumor has grown through the stomach wall and invaded the pancreas, or if cancer cells have broken off and traveled to the liver or the lymph nodes. That process is called staging.
Staging the cancer.
CT scans and MRIs provide a 3D cross-sectional map of the entire abdominal cavity. They allow the oncologist to see the exact size of the tumor and ascertain whether the disease is localized or metastatic.
It's a complete mechanical, cellular, and topographical workup. And once they have that map, they deploy the treatments.
The arsenal.
We hear these medical terms thrown around a lot on television, surgery, chemotherapy, radiation, targeted therapies. But what do they actually do mechanically in the context of stomach cancer?
They represent a broad, coordinated spectrum of warfare against the disease. Surgery is the brute force, mechanical approach. If the tumor is localized, the surgeon will physically remove it.
Just cut it out.
Depending on the size and location, this might mean a partial gastrectomy, removing a section of the stomach, or a total gastrectomy, where they remove the entire stomach and attach the esophagus directly to the small intestine.
Wait, you can live without a stomach?
You can. The digestive system adapts.
That's wild.
The small intestine takes over the primary role of digestion and nutrient absorption. Patients have to completely change how they eat, consuming very small, frequent meals rather than large ones. But it is a viable, life-saving procedure.
That is just mind-blowing. Okay, so surgery removes the main mass. What about chemotherapy and radiation?
Chemotherapy is the systemic approach. Cancer cells, by definition, divide and replicate much faster than normal cells. Chemotherapy drugs are designed specifically to seek out and destroy rapidly dividing cells anywhere in the body.
So it's like a systemic poison.
Yes, they are pumped into the bloodstream, acting as a systemic poison to the cancer. Radiation, on the other hand, is the localized, energy-based approach. It uses high-energy beams like X-rays or protons, targeted with pinpoint accuracy at the tumor bed to physically shatter the DNA of the cancer cells, preventing them from replicating.
And then there is the newest frontier, targeted treatments. How are those different from chemotherapy?
This is where molecular biology truly shines. Chemotherapy is somewhat indiscriminate. It attacks all fast-growing cells, which is why patients lose their hair and suffer gastrointestinal issues.
Because hair cells grow fast, too.
Exactly. Targeted therapies, however, operate like a molecular lock and key. For example, some stomach cancers produce an overabundance of a specific protein on their cell surface called HER2. It acts like an antenna, constantly telling the cancer cell to grow.
A growth antenna.
Scientists developed a targeted drug, an antibody like trastuzumab, that specifically looks for those HER2 antennas. It binds to them, shutting down the growth signal and flagging the cancer cell for the immune system to destroy, while largely ignoring the healthy cells that don't have the antenna.
That is brilliant. It's essentially hacking the cancer's own communication system.
It really is.
Now, I have to ask you a tough question. I'm looking at this incredible arsenal of modern medicine. We have lasers, we have high-definition endoscopes using light spectrums, we have robotic surgeries, we have genetically engineered molecular antibodies.
It sounds like science fiction.
It completely sounds like science fiction.
Yeah.
But every piece of research, every oncologist always circles back to the exact same phrasing. While advancements have improved survival rates, early detection remains the absolute key factor in successful outcomes.
Always.
Why is that? Why do we value early detection, literally just noticing you have a persistent stomachache, even more than a multi-million-dollar genetically targeted therapy?
Because time is the one variable, the one fundamental metric that modern medicine cannot manufacture.
Time.
No matter how targeted the therapy is, no matter how precise the surgical robot is, their efficacy is entirely bound by the volume of the disease.
The sheer amount of cancer in the body.
If a tumor has been growing silently for 5 years, shedding millions of mutated cells into the lymphatic system, establishing beachheads in the liver and the lungs before the patient ever seeks help, the sheer volume and biological momentum of the disease outpaces the technology.
We can slow it down, but we can't stop it.
We can extend life, but a cure becomes statistically elusive. The entire medical establishment relentlessly links success back to timely consultation because human cognitive awareness is the ultimate gatekeeper to medical intervention.
The ultimate gatekeeper.
The cure doesn't begin when the surgeon makes an incision. The cure begins in the mind of the patient, weeks or months earlier, when they decide not to ignore that symptom.
Wow. Human awareness is the gatekeeper. That is an incredibly powerful, sobering reality. And this intense, literal life or death need for early cognitive detection is exactly why awareness campaigns exist in the first place.
Exactly.
But here is where our exploration today takes a turn that I completely did not expect when we first started looking into this topic. We've talked about deep cellular biology, we've talked about the history of food preservation, we've talked about advanced diagnostic optics.
And we end up at memorials.
Yes. The data reveals that one of the most powerful, most effective places this life-saving awareness is currently spreading isn't in a doctor's office, and it isn't in a flashy, celebrity-endorsed television commercial. It's at the end of life. It's happening through memorial.
This is undoubtedly the most profound intersection we are exploring today. We are witnessing a massive sociological shift. We are watching the transformation of private mourning into vital public education.
When you look at the collateral damage of stomach cancer, the emotional impact is absolutely profound. It devastates families, largely because of the shock of that delayed diagnosis.
You go from feeling fine to fighting a stage 4 disease almost overnight.
And this is where the work of platforms like the funeral program site becomes so incredibly fascinating. They're highlighting how families, in the direct aftermath of losing someone to this disease, are actively choosing to incorporate the Periwinkle blue ribbon into their memorial services.
They're integrating it into printed funeral programs, on memorial cards, and heavily into digital tributes.
When I first grasped the scale of this, I was struck by the raw, incredible altruism of it. I mean, these families are in the deepest, darkest trenches of acute grief, trying to navigate the agonizing logistics of burying a loved one.
Which is overwhelming in itself.
Completely. And yet, in that exact moment of maximum pain, they're choosing to use their platform to educate their community.
It forces us to ask an important question about the modern function of a memorial. Historically, what was a funeral program? It was a static historical document.
Just a record of a life.
Right. It was a record of a life lived, a list of surviving relatives, and a schedule of the service. It looked backward. But what we are seeing now, facilitated by resources like the funeral program site, is the evolution of these materials into active, living, forward-looking documents.
The ribbon changes the whole context.
The inclusion of the periwinkle ribbon serves a dual, incredibly potent purpose. Yes, it honors the individual, acting as a poignant symbol of remembrance, but it simultaneously operates as a vanguard for early detection. It is a profound act of community support and solidarity aimed entirely at the living.
Let me push back on this a little bit, or at least play the skeptic. I understand the emotional resonance of it. It's beautiful.
Right.
But does it actually work mechanically?
You mean, does it lead to actual medical screenings?
Right. We are talking about a disease that requires a gastroenterologist to shove a high-tech camera down your throat to detect. Is putting a little blue ribbon on a funeral pamphlet or a digital guest book actually going to convince a stubborn 50-year-old guy to go get a medical procedure just because he has indigestion?
The psychological data suggests that, yes, it absolutely does. And it works because of a concept called mortality salience.
Mortality salience, what is that?
It's the psychological awareness of one's own inevitable death. When you attend a funeral, or when you read a profound digital tribute to someone who has passed, your mortality salience is triggered. Your psychological defenses are lowered.
You realize you aren't invincible.
Exactly. You are suddenly acutely aware of the fragility of human life. In that specific window of time, a person is vastly more receptive to health messaging than they are when they're just watching a commercial on their couch.
Context is everything.
If you hand that stubborn 50-year-old guy a pamphlet about stomach cancer at a grocery store, he throws it away. But if he is standing at the funeral of his friend, holding a memorial card with a periwinkle ribbon on it, the message bypasses his stubbornness.
It hits different.
It forces the question, what does this mean? How did John die? And suddenly, the tragic loss of a life becomes the exact, highly personalized catalyst that makes someone look inward and evaluate their own symptoms.
It creates a teachable moment when the student is most vulnerable and ready to listen. I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of someone attending one of these services. You walk in, you are handed the program by the funeral program site, and right there, next to the picture of your friend, is this calm, periwinkle blue ribbon.
You ask what it means. You learn what it means.
And maybe, just maybe, that specific moment is the reason an attendee finally goes to the doctor for that persistent indigestion they've been taking antacids for over the last 2 months.
And we have to acknowledge that this impact is no longer limited by physical geography or the capacity of a funeral home.
The internet changes everything.
The integration of digital platforms has exponentially increased the reach of this awareness. We aren't just talking about a printed card handed to 50 attendees anymore. We're talking about online guest books, interactive memorial websites, and dedicated social media tributes.
Right. The evolution of mourning into the digital age. A printed memorial card might be kept in a drawer by the people who physically attended the service, but a digital tribute on a memorial website can be linked, shared, and algorithmically amplified across multiple social media platforms.
It can reach hundreds, maybe thousands of people instantaneously.
Think about the actual network mechanics of that digital reach. A family member creates a digital tribute featuring the Periwinkle ribbon and a brief message about early detection. They post it to their network. Their friends share it.
People who haven't spoken to the deceased in 30 years see it on their feed.
It crosses entirely different social circles, economic classes, and geographic boundaries. Because stomach cancer receives less visibility in mainstream media, what we are witnessing is grieving families stepping into the void.
They have essentially formed a decentralized grassroots public health network. They were doing the hard, grinding work of increasing disease visibility, one digital tribute at a time.
I really want you to think about the sheer generosity of that act. The family is essentially standing up and saying, "We couldn't save our loved one. The delayed diagnosis caught us, the system failed us, or biology defeated us. But we are going to use our absolute darkest hour to make sure you know the signs.
It's incredibly moving.
We are going to put this Periwinkle ribbon on every digital guest book, on every memorial card, so that your family doesn't have to experience this exact pain." It is heartbreaking, but it is simultaneously one of the most beautiful expressions of human altruism I can think of.
It entirely redefines the concept of a legacy. We usually think of a legacy as wealth left behind or a building with someone's name on it.
Right, something physical.
But by integrating the ribbon and the message of awareness into the mourning process, the legacy of the deceased becomes intrinsically tied to public health. Their memory literally promotes early detection in others. The ribbon stops being just a marker of grief and transforms into a symbol of ongoing education and fierce vigilance.
Vigilance. That is the perfect word to wrap this entire deep dive around. We have covered an immense, complex amount of ground today, pulling apart the layers of a truly insidious disease and the incredible human response to it.
It's been quite a journey.
We started by looking at the paradox of the periwinkle ribbon, how its quiet, subtle color, perfectly, almost tragically, represents a stealthy disease that suffers from a dangerously low public profile. We took a hard, microscopic look at the biology of the stomach lining.
The acid, the cell turnover.
Understanding how its constant cellular regeneration and extreme acidic environment allow cancer to grow silently, leading to that terrifying window of delayed diagnosis where the alarm system simply fails to ring.
We also unpacked the incredibly complex web of environmental and genetic risk factors. We decoded how ancient civilization-building preservation techniques like smoking and salting meats now act as modern chemical irritants by introducing DNA-damaging nitrosamines.
The ultimate irony.
We explored the fascinating Nobel Prize-winning discovery of the H. pylori bacteria and how its alkaline invisibility cloak allows it to cause decades of silent cancerous inflammation. And we balance all of those heavy risks with the empowering, actionable knowledge that a diet rich in whole foods and antioxidants serves as a literal active defense mechanism at the cellular level.
We talked extensively about the psychology of the everyday symptom. We discussed how easy and natural it is to normalize bloating and nausea, and why the word persistent is the most important warning sign your body can give you before severe mechanical symptoms like dysphagia or internal bleeding hit.
The mechanical failure of the system.
We explored the diagnostic tools, the high-definition endoscopies using narrowband imaging, and the definitive truth of pathology biopsies. And we realized that despite all our advanced chemotherapies and genetically targeted molecular treatments, time and early cognitive detection are still the undisputed kings of oncology survival.
Because you can't manufacture time.
And finally, we explored the profound, highly emotional intersection of mourning and medicine. We saw how platforms like the Funeral Program site are empowering grieving families to transform both traditional paper and digital memorials into vital public health campaigns.
Using the periwinkle ribbon, and the psychology of mortality salience to turn their immense personal loss into life-saving awareness for the broader community.
It is an epic journey from the microscopic mutation of a single epithelial cell in the stomach lining all the way out to the massive sociological impact of a shared digital guest book. And it all constantly circles back to that central, vital theme of awareness.
It all comes back to that.
Which brings me to a final thought I want to leave you with today. Something for you to mull over that builds on everything we've unpacked. We are conditioned to think of fighting cancer as something that happens solely in sterile laboratories or under the blindingly bright lights of surgical operating rooms or through massive multi-million-dollar PR campaigns orchestrated by giant nonprofits.
That's the typical narrative.
But what if one of the most vital, effective battlegrounds for public health is actually found in how we choose to remember the people we've lost? Next time you see an awareness ribbon, especially a quiet, calm, periwinkle blue one attached to a memorial card or scrolling past on a social media tribute, stop for a second. Ask yourself, whose memory is quietly trying to teach you something about your own future?
It demands that we look at grief not just as a final ending, but as a vital, incredibly urgent, ongoing conversation with the living.
Exactly. Think back to that alarm system we talked about at the very beginning of the show. The disease might be the silent intruder quietly slipping through the back door, moving the furniture inch by inch without making a single sound. The body might completely fail to ring the bell.
But your awareness becomes the bell.
Your deep knowledge of your diet, your aggressive refusal to ignore persistent discomfort, and your willingness to absorb the hard lessons passed down by the families who have already fought the battle, that cognitive awareness becomes your siren. It becomes the flashing lights.
You have to build the alarm system yourself.
Don't wait for the glass to break to know you're in danger. Know your house. Know your baseline. Stay curious. Stay intensely vigilant. And never, ever ignore what your body might be persistently whispering to you. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We will catch you next time.